one on the impact of the Chinese Communist Party on the world, viz. North America and Western Europe. And so, but I also thought I can't really do this by myself because I don't have the range of expertise. And so I was giving a talk at a think tank, Merix, in Berlin, and I caught up for lunch with a couple of experts from Merix, the think tank, one of whom was Marika Olberg. And we had a very interesting conversation, and it occurred to me a day or two later that she would be a fantastic co-author. And so I asked her if she'd be willing to, and she said yes, obviously. And I was very happy with that because Marika has brought to the project of this new book, Hidden Hand, a kind of breadth or extent of knowledge, particularly in Europe, but also, of course, the Chinese language skills and the insights into the functioning of the Chinese Communist Party that only someone with her level of deep expertise and her extended periods of study and work in China, and I believe in Taiwan and Hong Kong, can bring to a project like this. And so we formed a team and off we went. And so we wanted to write this book because we're aware that there's a well-organised and systematic attempt to reshape the world, particularly the Western world, by the Chinese Communist Party, and a great deal of naivety and in some places ignorance about China under the CCP and the way it operates in the West. And so we wanted to collect together from available sources, from some very obscure sources and from some people we knew with expertise and experience. We wanted to collect a whole swathe of evidence on the comprehensive campaign of CCP interference and influence in Western countries, and to put it in a framework for understanding why is the CCP doing this? How does it go about it? What are the techniques it uses? What's the role of the United Front Work Department and the range of other agencies that we in Australia are now starting to become somewhat familiar with, but which are completely foreign to people. It was due to come out in English all around the world, also in early May. But Hardy Grant decided to put it off because of the coronavirus shutdown. But it did come out some 3 weeks ago in Australia. But the publisher in London, which covers the UK and US, decided to put it off until September. But then the publisher in London, One World, had suddenly a media frenzy, which began 10 days ago. And the media frenzy began because one of the organisations discussed in the book, known as the 48 Group Club in London, that organisation and its chairman, a man named Stephen Perry, sent a threatening letter from their lawyers to One World, the publisher in London, saying that the club and its chairman had been defamed, that the book was full of serious errors, and that they demanded various changes and that other things, and we should not go ahead and publish. Anyway, this story got out basically through the Globe and Mail, find their way through it. And of course, the other reason why Marika and I are extremely meticulous in our referencing and giving credible sources is because we want to make sure that we're not subject to any kind of legal claim. And we do know that the Chinese Communist Party in its arsenal of political warfare weapons is known to use lawfare, that is the use of the legal system as a way of silencing and intimidating its critics. So on that note, I might introduce the chair, Chris Uhlmann. And Chris, perhaps you'd like to make some comments and ask some questions.
Yeah, Clive, sorry. And again, technology was defeating me there for a while. I'm on my phone now. But one of the things that I find fascinating about this is that you started that book, Silent Invasion, where you look at influence operations inside Australia. But then essentially when you extended your remit to the rest of the world, you saw a similar pattern emerging everywhere. How is it that the Chinese Communist Party goes about essentially trying to recruit the elites around the world? How do they groom these people?
Well, it's interesting you should use that word, grooming, because it's one that I think we use it once or twice in the book, and I thought about it for a while. whether we should use this word grooming, but it seems to be such an apt word to describe the way the Chinese Communist Party focuses on winning over individuals amongst the political, business, academic and cultural and indeed media elites in Western countries. And when I use the word grooming, I mean the use of psychological techniques to befriend and to establish a rapport with the target person in order to lower their inhibitions and create a sense of reciprocity, opening them up to seeing the world in a way that suits one's interests. And we give quite a few examples in the book. And of course, the grooming techniques are tailored to the target involved. We in Australia are kind of well ahead of everyone else in understanding this process, in large measure because we have benefited from some excellent journalism exposing particular individuals who have been the subject of these grooming techniques. Incidentally, James Jian To, the New Zealand expert on United Front strategies, in his brilliant book called Chow Wu, which actually arose out of his PhD thesis, he got access to some hard-to-access archives in Beijing to write his. He talks about the psychological techniques which United Front cadres are trained to use in order to win over their targets, particularly in the elites. And we saw a very nice example with Sam Dastyari, and Sam Dastyari has done us the favour of, when he saw the light and did his mea culpa, he actually spoke about how he had been groomed by Huang Jiangmo, the kind of techniques of flattery, of being brought into the confidence, of being having his ego boosted, of playing to his weaknesses. And, we really benefit from having people like that. So that gives you a bit of a flavour of the techniques that they use.
And look, what I love about the book is the level of detail that you go into. There are so many examples from right around the world with the same techniques used. And you can imagine someone like Sam Dastyari is not as sophisticated as someone who might become an ambassador to a country. But you show examples of where the Canadian ambassador and the Swedish ambassador essentially end up not representing their countries, but feeling that their role is to explain China to their countries and to the world.
It's absolutely fascinating. And, I'd been writing and thinking about this, and then along comes John McCallum. John McCallum was a long-term Sinophile, and he'd been appointed by Pierre Trudeau as Canada's ambassador in Beijing. And he loved China and everything about China, and which is, in one way fair enough, but it also makes him extremely vulnerable, because he had this sense that he understands China. And this is a dangerous thing. And so what happened was when the Huawei CFO, Huang Wenzhou, was arrested in December 2018 on an extradition warrant from the United States, charged with fraud, Beijing went absolutely berserk. And, we think we're under pressure from Beijing at the moment. Well, it was a lot worse and still is in Canada. They arrested innocent Canadians who are still rotting in jail. And I'm very worried that may well happen to Australians, incidentally. But that's by the by. But John McCallum made a series of public statements along the lines of, first of all, offering in public legal advice to Ms. Meng as to how she could get out of her arrest and avoid the extradition. And then he gave advice to Chinese language media, but of course it was reported by the Star in Vancouver. Joanna Chu was the reporter who was there. He basically gave advice to his bosses that they should just let her go, that it wasn't worth the candle, that it was in Beijing's interest to repudiate its extradition treaty with the United States and just let her go. And Trudeau was forced to sack his ambassador because he was really pressuring Ottawa to do what Beijing wanted it to do. instead of explaining to Ottawa how Beijing operates and how Ottawa can properly respond to it, he was basically acting as a proxy for Beijing, and he was fired as a result. And then there was a fascinating story in one of the newspapers where a journalist went to speak to the Mexican ambassador to Beijing, former Mexican, and he said, I know exactly what happened to John McCallum because they tried it on me and I saw them try it on lots of ambassadors. What they do is when you get there, they put you in the freezer. And as an ambassador, you think, oh my God, I can't do my job. And then after a while, they send an envoy who says, look, a very, very important person wants to meet you because he thinks that you have a unique understanding of China. So you go along very excited. And then the flattery starts. Look, we really need to meet with you because we understand that you have a particularly deep understanding of China. You recognize that very few people can understand China. We want to let you into some of our inner thoughts. And so he's won. He thinks, okay, I'm now in a special position. I am one of the few people in the world who can explain China, which is so hard to understand, it's so inscrutable, that, it's my job to go out to the world, and particularly to my government, and explain the position of the Chinese government and actually advocate for the Chinese government and constantly put the view that, it's hard to understand, it's opaque, I understand it, and we really need to keep Beijing happy. And that's what John McCallum was doing. He'd been groomed, he'd been captured, he was naive, and he became a Beijing mouthpiece. It was tragic in a way, and yet there are many examples around the world, not least in our own Department of Foreign Affairs.
One of